Here your faith finds welcome and hope. It is not possible for us to combine the present moment without the combination of all this and the combination of the future, this time that we don't even know if we will have. It depends on the wise articulation of the past that we had with the present that we have today, this articulation that allows us to take steps to walk, always believing that the hand of God sustains us, but believing in the right way. Whenever I think of God's providence, I think of it as a favor. Whatever, it stops being present in my life. Friend, but at the same time, Anderson, I really never am a professional. My chance to do my part. Because humanly, my people, we've already learned, even psychology and pedagogy teach us, that a good educator never gives his disciples a ready-made mission. It would be a crime against a disciple to offer them a ready-made mission. I've done everything in this city, so he can be sure that we should move to another city to clear up any doubts, to help dissolve whatever is hindering learning. But at times, the 18th, some pressure, will it be to live with a runaway slave? Crazy. What did she say? Can 6 police officers shoot more bullets? Avoid catastrophe. Refusing to give the answer that we're in the hospital. That's how life is. In the answers that God can only answer secretly. In her house written Madam. So it makes sense. Couldn't it be my documents that sometimes we have the illusion? Is this the result of a naive vision? Yes, unfortunately, I give all the religious discourse throughout our lives that IT can put us in position. It's a naive view, not for him, that God will do everything for us, that God does this, that God does that. It's very true. We have the right to believe in protection and put it to the test. I'll have to move, but other changes, and we begin to be forced to do our part. It's a matter of knowing the day. There was maturity that remains. A father does this to his son. He does this to Freezer. A newspaper that appears in another episode. Lula can't say here that they're taking a fugitive. But make a gate. 3 police officers? However, more in the harvest. To avoid infection. We can't make ourselves think that he will do everything. How to do things. I really like that expression. We only have the right to hope for the impossible after we've done everything that red lady. Sorry I didn't say. It wouldn't be seeing the documents, but he also asked me to do my part in this protection. I pray to God for my life. I ask him to give me health, but I need to do my part to make this health a reality in my life. It's not the care I take of myself. It's an expression of so many things from this part of me, the miracle I need to perform daily. Motau, sometimes I identify death with the hand of God, with evil. We look for a gift in my story. You know where it is, but you don't. He's holding it, as I think he does. He's surprised. He stays in jail, gets used to it. Everything in life you get used to, and the prisoner doesn't have to worry because the prisoner does. If we tried, this takes at the same time, you have 5 square meters. We learn to worry. That's a fact. A protected area we sometimes receive, and it's he who pays for it properly. I was there in my prison. The prisoner got sick. Where do you take him? To the public hospital? Let me be exposed. The hospital pass in front of you. You need to live and experience it alone. You never see his presence. We always look at each other. But looking at this government of theirs, you serving the prisoner pass in front of you, the price of series that will result, and it's one of the ones I cross off, I think. But I would take the car of the visitor. He's fighting for his life. And the guy who's in prison, 30 years old. This guy in prison may be a little chubby, but he seems to be growing. He's smaller. Brazil is a country with a lot of white people because of the situation. The age of the park, you know their perceived disadvantages. 50 this year, look at that. And sometimes then in that moment of despair, you think, depending on my God, it seems like I've been abandoned by the Lord, doesn't it? Couples outside the country part. Couples want commitment. They have to exclude some people who Instagram they fall very well for love, and also in boots to need to go through the hard experience of being unprotected. Shrek and 2. His design is World Day with a cape on his back, but he is, when a person is excessively protected. Deep down, on the contrary to all this, there's a lack of protection, because that person cannot mature. So will they be eternally naive? To stay eternally believing that they're inside a fairy tale, and life is not a fairy tale. So, believing in God's protection does not give us the right to think that God will do everything for us, that He will walk for us. He will always be strengthening us ahead of these battles we need to face, but we will be responsible for doing our part. Think about how that hand that helped Moses, the one in this passage, of very great wealth. How strange. When Moses is terrified, why did he lead the people out of Egypt? And he went towards that protected, promised land. You see, also a little protected, right? The promised land would be reached with a promise God made to Moses, as long as they encourage themselves to lead those people out of slavery and overcome the difficulties outlined. See, anyone who has had the opportunity to go to Israel knows very well what desire is. If you enter that desert to reach a place whose location we don't know, it's only in a man's heart as a promise. It's a very great difficulty. And the people believed. They followed Moses. They began to experience the restrictions of the desert, the hunger. They began to miss the onions. It's not because they don't eat it. They ate onions during the time of slavery. Onions were the main food. That's why we sometimes use the expression, "Don't cry over the onions of Egypt." It's not like that. You must have heard this expression when someone advises you not to stop lamenting the past. What does it mean to mourn the onions of Egypt? I mean, I was a slave, but I had this food. I had onions to feed me, and now I'm free, but I have nothing. Calm down. Give the desert time. Allow the desert to tell you what it needs to say. Even hunger. Restriction is extremely important in the human process. We constantly identify that people are spoiled because they lack nothing. When you have a child who has been pampered since childhood, they lacked absolutely nothing. And suddenly, in the wilderness of life, that person has to face the desert of life. They don't have enough ammunition to cope. So what can we do? How do we face the desert there in that moment? When Moses led the people out of slavery and encourage ourselves, lead these people through the desert, on the way to the promised land. He also feels fear. He also doesn't know what will happen. That's why he constantly, through the manifestations of God, in that moment of Moses' life, he communicates with God. These are the epiphanies. It's not just these glorious manifestations of God there, through simple reality, the burning bush, the stone gushing water. Anyway, God talks to Moses, gives him signs that he's on the right path, but doesn't deprive him of the vulnerability that the desert leaves him. So defenseless in that desert, materially speaking, he can establish a trust in God that no other can, a comfort, an ability. Do you see how interesting it is? How this vulnerability, this apparent vulnerability, has all the hidden behind-the-scenes care there. Just like you as a father, as a mother, you create restriction for your child so that he can mature. Isn't that right? Sometimes you take something away from your child so that he truly feels a lack, so that later he'll be able to appreciate it later. I say again, many people fail in life because they lack nothing. Then you notice that when there's too much lack, it can also cause imbalance. 11, lack of trust in people's lives. This me that has the balance that is right when you start to educate by putting protection, and apparent lack of protection, where that person will still have to face the situation alone, that you are seeing from afar. Me, I face extremely difficult situations in my life that were not enough for someone else to say, I am here. Why? Because they were mine. It even helps to look to the side and know that you have a friend with you, that there's a mother, that they're a father or brother. But in many moments of our lives, this ordeal is to be lived in solitude. That's when I need to live, this feeling of being unprotected, in the same way that Moses lived when he stepped into the discomforts of the desert. When facing those discomforts, he understood that it is the human condition. So I also have this experience, do you? I don't want to spend my life in white clouds. I really don't. And that's why, since I was a child, when life was difficult for me, I found something in that discomfort that made me think bigger, that made me think beyond. Moses, living the discomfort of the desert, needed to convince those around him that that discomfort would be worth it. Okay, but some wanted to return to slavery. Look how human weakness is. It's very present in our lives at times of discomfort. So many people. I'll give you a simple example to help you understand. There are people who need to break up with relationships that are terrible and disastrous. That person only hurts you, you know that, but you have a bond with them. You have a real need. You can't break up with that relationship. Then, suddenly, you feel emboldened. Everything becomes clear to you. This person isn't good for me. I can't marry that person because if they're like that when we're dating, imagine what it's like when we get married. Then when we get married. Then when I got married, it became hell, even worse than it already was. Then you were encouraged, motivated by people who are by your side, to break up. Then it's terrible the day you don't. The suffering is cruel inside you. It seems like you'll never recover, and you only think about that person. Why? Because even though they hurt you so much, you have an unhealthy bond with them of emotional dependence. You know they hurt you, but you don't know how to live without them. Then you start taking steps. The first week is horrible. You suffer. You cry. You can't hear the music. You can't smell the smell. You can't see that little piece of being. What did even get there in your house? All of that is terrible. But suddenly, you start taking steps towards liberation. It's as if you were walking toward an earth that will only do you good. 1 month later, that suffering got better. 2 months later, that suffering got better. And suddenly you don't even remember anymore? Of course, there's still a silent bond there, being disarmed because emotional dependence doesn't die overnight. We need it. It's as if you were suffocating a cancer cell with chemotherapy. You know that you're taking the life out of the cancer cell, the cell that kills us. Then, let's say 3 months later, you meet that person again and you have that famous relapse. Then there you go. The castle you were building, the ground you had walked, which had been so difficult, you throw away and you return to the edict. You return to slavery. Do you do the same thing you use? Moses' companions want to make him eat the onion again, the rotten, spoiled food again. Then you rekindle that relationship because it's unhealthy, and you didn't maintain the proper distance you should. Because when you have this emotional dependence, you have to establish distance. Because otherwise, you won't heal. You have to stop wanting to know about that person's life. Because otherwise, you won't heal. You need to stop snooping on their Facebook. Because otherwise, you won't heal. You need to stop investigating the victim. Because they do what they give life to. You have to stop all the things that can make me want to go back to Egypt. You'll never be free. Then, 3 months later, you're beautiful, already killing the cancer cell. You go in for a few more kisses on the mouth. That horrible dependence returns, and hell returns to your life and in your first week. It's actually good that everything is coming back soon, my daughter. You're in hell worse than you were 3 months ago. Yes. When we don't know how to live the discomfort, that builds us. We boycott ourselves all the time. It's like quitting drinking. It's like quitting smoking. You don't smoke for a year, and you celebrate because you stop releasing that carcinogenic toxin into your body, and suddenly you go there and light a cigarette for no reason, and that addiction comes back like a monster capable of eating you whole. All that sacrifice you made in the first days without smoking goes down the drain. Why? All that sacrifice goes down the drain. Why? Because you weren't able to experience the discomfort of giving up. And thus, it's amazing how this hand of God helps us like this, making us aware of what we need to break in our lives. These are situations that we need to set limits for, because if not, we will never be healed. We will be eternally sick in the line of those in need, crying and begging for a little bread of kindness from another, a little bread of affection from another. For God's sake, we were not made for this. We were not made to drag around emotionally dependent people. We were made to love, and love only has meaning in our lives if it seeks to build us up, if it helps us get through the discomfort of the desert. Otherwise, it makes no sense. ISP, give up love, this false love that we sometimes say we feel for each other, which doesn't help us through the discomfort of the desert. I need to live my desert. You need to live yours. And true friends are those who recognize the needs of others and say so. Will we go through this desert because you need it? We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your presence. The fact that you stayed this far shows that our work has a purpose, to take God's word ever further. If this message touched you, will you share this video with someone special? Leave a comment, like it, and if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of the next reflections. May God bless you. I am in your life, your family, and your paths, today and always. Amen.